Hi everybody, I'm Dr. John Douillard and welcome to the LifeSpa podcast where we prove the ancient medical wisdom of Ayurveda with modern science. And today we have a special podcast where I'm going to dive deeply into the lymphatic system. In Ayurveda, the word lymph is called rasa, and the study of rasa is called rasayana in Ayurveda. And the study of rasayana is the study of longevity and rejuvenation. And that's why it's such an important topic, where in Ayurveda, they knew that the lymphatic system was critical to our overall health and longevity. And now there's so much Western science backing it up that I want to dive deep into that ancient wisdom, understanding, and the modern science of the lymphatic system. Unfortunately, all this science is buried in the medical journals, and very little of it is actually applied in medical practice. Where in Ayurveda, they've been applying this in medical practice for literally thousands of years. So I did ask you guys for some questions. I have a whole list of questions here. So I figure what I'll do is I'll talk for about an hour and then I'll go into and dive into your questions. So let's dive in. First of all, though, also, if you're watching this on any of the social channels like YouTube or Instagram or wherever, please subscribe, like, and follow. That really helps us out a lot. And also, if you're watching this on my website at LifeSpa.com, there also is about a 15-page document there with links to deeper knowledge and articles and videos that I write about on LifeSpa.com, where you can dive deeper into the lymphatic system if you like. Okay, so there's a lot of knowledge there. At LifeSpa, as you probably know, we have a library of about 1,500 articles on ancient wisdom, modern science. It's all scientific reference, so I just type in your health concern and you should be able to get helped out there. Of course, while you're there, sign up for our newsletter so you get our fresh articles all the time. This particular podcast, the reason why I'm doing it, because there's lots of really cool new information, really cool new science about the lymph that I haven't spoken about before, but I thought I'd bring it out in this way. So I'm excited about that. And also at lifespa.com, check out our Ayurvedic store. We have all of our Ayurvedic herbs and skincare and knowledge and books and tapes. Everything that I've been doing over the last 40 years is there at lifespa.com as well. Alrighty, so let's dive in. So first of all, I guess, what is the lymphatic system? The lymph is actually the fluid, the plasma-esque like substance that is in the blood. When your heart pumps blood, it goes into the arterioles, into the capillaries, and it oozes out into the plasma, not the red blood cells. They stay in the blood, they feed the cells, but the plasma kind of oozes out into the extracellular spaces all around the cell. And that fluid is sort of very much like the plasma of the blood, pretty much is that. And then that gets uptaken into the lymphatic system, which then all that's carried back to your heart. And then the heart pumps it back into circulation. And what is the lymph doing? Why is it doing all this? Well, it's trying to take the trash out. So all the metabolic debris and toxins from metabolism that are in the extracellular spaces can get uptaken into the lymphatic system. It's taking out the trash. It's also carrying your immune system. So if that lymph is stuck in traffic, you're going to feel some immune compromise. And it's also trying to deliver properly broken down fatty acids into every cell of your body for baseline energy, right? So if you're tired all the time, then that might mean your lymph is not delivering that fat as well as it should. If you have an immune compromise, that could be another indicator of your lymphatic system being stuck in traffic. You know, when COVID first came out, there were studies done that long-haul COVID was linked to congestion of the brain, lymph, and lymphatic systems. The brain dumps about 3 pounds of trash out of the head through two specific types of lymphatic dumping systems. One's called the lymph, one's called the glymphatic system. And they dump about 3 pounds of trash out of your head every night while you sleep every year, which is a lot. And when they did the research on COVID, they found that congestion of the brain, lymph, and lymphatic systems were linked to long-haul COVID. So whenever you have an immune event, right, COVID, vaccine, anything, the master computer has to know how many fire trucks to send to the immune event on Main Street somewhere in your body. But if that lymphatic system is congested, and particularly the brain lymphatic system is congested, well then you're going to have a situation where the master computer doesn't know how many fire trucks it sends. Does it send 100? Does it send 1 or 2? It can be overzealous or underperforming, and that can create real problems in an immune response. And if the brain lymphatic stays congested, well, that's what they found to be linked to long-haul COVID, right? So chronic compromised immunity is basically the cause. So we'll dive deeper into that system as well. So let's just talk about some of the symptoms that you might have. I do have a lymph quiz that you can take on my website, LifeSpa.com. Type in the lymph quiz, and it can ask you a whole bunch of questions about your lymph, and you can kind of determine if your lymph's congested and where and why it is. But things like, if your rings get swollen and tight on your fingers, well, that be an indicator that your lymph is draining, remember, back to your heart. And if that's not draining very well, you're going to get lymph congestion. If you have any skin issues, that might be more predominant anywhere, but more predominant on the hands and the feet and the legs. That means the lymph's trying to take the trash out against gravity from your feet up to your head, your heart, and that can be somewhat problematic against gravity, and that's sometimes where you most commonly see the lymph concerns. Swelling hands and feet, rashes, hands and feet, or legs or arms, those kinds of things can be a factor. When you wake up in the morning and you're really tired or lethargic or super stiff in the morning, that's your lymph trying to get going because you've been lying in bed all night and the lymph is pooled. And if that lymph is congested, you're going to wake up and it's going to be like, So when you really think about it, it's that first imbalance linked to inflammation, right? So when you wake up in the morning, you feel, oh my God, I'm so stiff. That's inflammation. Well, you should wake up feeling refreshed and ready to go, not stiff. And that's a lymphatic issue. So we're going to talk about ways to treat that by treating the lymph before you go to bed, because if the master computer is congested and you're trying to drain trash while you sleep and the lymph pools while you sleep, you can take some Ayurvedic herbs before you go to sleep and help mitigate that so you don't have that big pooling effect. And we're also talking about how the lymphatic system is very intimately related to your digestive system and how critically important that is. And if you don't digest your food well, a lot of the undigested food will get into your lymph and create skin rashes, food comas, big bellies, tiredness, brain fog, all kinds of things. So we're going to dive into all that stuff. And then there's a surprise discussion we're going to have about the impact of nitric oxide and your lymphatic system. Nitric oxide is a molecule that won the Nobel, research on that molecule won the Nobel Prize in 1998. And really, really important molecule. They call it the panacea molecule. And now we have really good research on all the foods that will actually boost nitric oxide, specifically with regard to your lymphatic system, as well as the herbs that do the same thing. So stay tuned for that. And then, of course, we're going to do the questions at the end. And so here we go. So first thing is, there's different lymphatic areas of the body that are concentrated. You have lymph vessels, and you have lymph nodes. The lymph vessels are pumping your lymph by contracting your muscles or moving or exercising or staying hydrated, all critical for the lymphatic system. And the lymph nodes are where the white blood cells are. They're the ones who any pathogen or bacteria, virus that got in the lymph would get clobbered or kind of diffuse in these lymph nodes. That's why the lymph nodes will swell, because they're having, basically, there's an immune event in those lymph nodes, right? So that's the two types of lymph. But then you have the lion's share of the lymph in your body, bar none, is called the gut-associated lymphatic tissue. It's all around your intestinal tract. And that is directly linked to your gut immunity, right? So you have 70% of your immune response is basically in your gut and your gut immunity. And that's a critical, important piece of the puzzle. And that lymphatic system lives around the intestinal tract. And the lymphatic system in your body starts inside your intestinal tract. I wrote an article years ago called the most important half inch of your body. It's probably more like I don't know, maybe more of a quarter of an inch really realistically, but maybe a half inch. But the idea is that the lymph on the inside of your intestinal tract has little collecting ducts, and then the lion's share of the lymph and the immunity response is on the outside of your intestinal tract, which sort of makes sense, right? You eat stuff, you breathe stuff, you swallow stuff, it all ends up in your intestinal tract, and if it's not healthy that you just swallowed, there's got to be a trash removal system, and it's not just the toilet. So that's going to go into the lymph around your intestinal tract, and that's critically important. You have what's called your skin-associated lymph. So there's an army of immune defenders right underneath your skin. So you get bit by a mosquito, and there's a little red dot. That's great. That's because your immune system kept it from your lymphatic system, kept it, the skin-associated lymph, kept that from becoming systemic. You have respiratory-associated lymph. You have respiratory tissue. Wherever you have skin, and this is skin, the intestinal tract is lined with inner skin. It's just epithelium. Basically, it's all the same kind of tissue. Respiratory tract is lined with skin, epithelium. Wherever you have that, on the other side of that, you're going to have a lymphatic army there to protect, because anything that gets through that skin, sort of our protective barrier, is going to be, we're going to respond with a lymphatic immune army. And that's why in the intestinal tract, the lion's share of lymph in the body is on the other side of your intestinal tract to kind of fight. So those are the major areas. And your gut immunity is directly linked to your respiratory immunity. So if you have poor digestion, don't digest certain things very well, have to take foods out of your diet, then your respiratory lymph is going to be compromised. If you have a respiratory issue, that'll affect gut immunity. They're bidirectionally. There's a microbiome in your gut, as you all know. There's bugs in your gut, but there's also a microbiome in your respiratory tract, and they're bidirectional. They work together. Okay, so that's really critically important as well. I think the next step for us is to talk about the digestive component. And I'm going to quote a study for you that showed that when you don't digest your proteins and your fats as well as you should, then those proteins and fats will go incompletely digested into your intestinal tract. And because they're incompletely digested, they're too big to get into your blood and nourish you like nutrition, they get uptaken into the garbage can, which is not the toilet. It's the lymphatic collecting ducts that will gobble up and pull out all these toxins into your lymphatic system, and then be processed through lymph nodes and then processed back to your liver to be processed properly. It's sort of like a sparing system where the body doesn't want to let any good nutrition go, but at the same time it's got to filter it out. And that filtering system, the good from the bad, is of course your lymphatic system, right? So we have all these people who are taking food out of their diet, whether it be wheat or dairy or nuts or seeds or nightshades or goitrogens or oxalates or phytic acids or anti-nutrients of all kinds, because people say they shouldn't eat oxalates or whatever. Oftentimes that's because the digestive strength is dialed down, and as you don't digest those foods very well, they get uptaken into the collecting ducts of the lymph, and they go into the lymph, and they will, if they're overwhelmingly, if that's a problem, then that'll get pushed into the lymph and give you extra weight around your belly, compromising gut immunity. It'll actually congest your respiratory lymph, creating either breathing problems or possibly respiratory, immune compromise. It can go into the brain lymphatic system, giving you, some cognitive decline and compromised immunity, as I mentioned earlier. It can go into your skin-associated lymph, give you rashes. So all these symptoms, when I eat this food, I get a rash. I eat this food, I get brain fog. I eat this food, I get bloated. It's not the food, although there are things that we should do about the food. Processed food is bad, glyphosate's bad, I get all that, but you can get clean food in America. It's a little harder than I would like it to be, of course, but you can definitely get that. Oxalates aren't a bad food. They're on spinach, and it's quite good for you. But if you don't handle those oxalates very well, there could be a genetic predisposition for that, and that's something you have to look out for. But it also could be a broken down, weakened digestive system, which forces folks to bubble wrap their diet, eat only a certain amount of food. And that becomes a big problem. I don't want to go off on a tangent, but there were studies done at Stanford, and they found that they did research on the poop in mummies from the New Mexico and Arizona. And these mummies were 1,000 years old, that they found, and they measured the microbiome of those 1,000-year-old mummies. Hard to believe they could do that, but they did. And they found there was so much more diversity of microbial activity in their guts than us modern humans, that they literally called that an extinction event for us having lacking of this diversity, which is why it's so important we don't just bubble wrap our diet and just eat less and less and less food. That's more problematic than you think. I feel better, which of course, if you don't feel good eating something, stop eating it, but let's fix the upstream cause. Because the mechanism of why that's making you feel sick is your lymphatic system. Undigested proteins and fats. And we're talking about proteins like dairy or nuts or seeds or grains or beans, things like that, anti-nutrients. And fats, there's 70 million tons of toxic chemicals dumped in our atmosphere according to the EPA every year. And that filters down into the air we breathe, the water we drink, food we eat, goes into your intestinal tract. If those aren't properly broken down by liver bile, who emulsifies fats, which is a part of the digestive system, which is oftentimes broken down because of lots of bad oils in lots of processed food, packaged foods, things like that. The liver becomes sludgy with bile, and that doesn't allow the bile to react on demand the way it should, to emulsify a lot of these bad fats or greasy fried food, things that are really hard to digest. Not that we should eat them, but we should be able to, right? And they end up too big to get in your blood. They end up in your lymph. And that creates the lymphatic congestion that I mentioned, all these tired rashes, skin concerns, brain fog, immune compromise, just a lethargy and tiredness and fatigue, so many different things. So that's what happens with the digestive system. And from there, it can impact the gut-associated lymph, gut immunity, the skin-associated lymph, the brain lymph, respiratory lymph. Everything in the lymphatic system can begin to break down, which is really kind of problematic. Now, the number one pump for your lymphatic system is your diaphragm. I know, hard to believe, but the diaphragm pumps your lymphatic system out, all the lymph from your belly, and it also pumps cerebrospinal fluid up into your head to pump the trash out of your head. So the brain lymph and lymphatic systems are so critical, and if you don't breathe well, and your diaphragm is not functioning well, then you're not going to pump the cerebrospinal fluid into your brain to move the trash out of your brain, and your brain lymphatic system can get congested. The brain lymphatic system, like I said, dumps 3 pounds of trash out of your head every year while you sleep. They discovered that only about 17 years ago at the University of Virginia. But since then, lots and lots and lots of research has been going into this system, which Ayurvedic knew about thousands of years ago, by the way. And they found that when the brain, lymph, and lymphatic systems are congested, they're linked to anxiety, depression, cognitive decline, inflammation, infection, and even autoimmunity. Of course, poor sleep as well, because if you don't sleep well, brain doesn't drain well. Brain doesn't drain well because of congestion or whatever, poor digestion, then you don't sleep well. So it's another indicator for poor sleep. So thousands of years ago, written in one of the Ayurvedic textbooks 2,500 years ago, they wrote about a therapy called nausea to sniff medicated oil up into the nose and clean out the brain lymphatic system. So they talked about cleaning out the sagittal sinus and the transverse sinus of your brain. Ayurveda called these channels tarpaka, which means to detoxify and to hold on to or record old emotional trauma. So Ayurvedic medicine knew that sometimes when we're traumatized, say as a child or whatever, that we can hold on to that stress, and that can create kind of behavioral patterns that can last a lifetime. And it's something that Western medicine is only just beginning to understand that. But in Ayurveda, they developed these therapies. And I wrote an article called Shiro Abhyanga Nasya. It's called S-A-N, Nasya, sinus cleansing and emotional baggage. And so that article gives you a step-by-step procedure of how to actually do this brain lymphatic cleansing technique, which there really is no other technique. Head massage, vigorous head massage, getting the scalp to move on your skull, can also help for sure move the lymphatic system inside your skull. Believe it or not, studies show if you massage your head, the brain lymphatic system works better. And breathing helps make that function significantly better. So I invite you to read that article about the sinus cleansing and emotional baggage through the sagittal sinus, which is this kind of mohawk haircut area. So that's what Ayurvedic knew. That's where the brain lymphatic traveled. And when they did the research on it, that's where they discovered it. It was right there in the brain lymphatic and glymphatic systems. Pretty amazing, right? So now we have a technique. And I can tell you a quick story about, I've had so many, when I administered an Ayurvedic center, our Panchakarmic center for 26 years, I over the years began to realize that Ayurvedic Panchakarma was really more of an emotional, transformational technique, because it's this crazy mind of ours that gets us into trouble. Holding on to old emotional trauma that we don't let go of gets us into trouble, because if the brain lymphatic master computer isn't functioning well, we're going to have problems, right? And so this one woman came into my clinic, and I started doing more and more of these and give people self-inquiry exercises and journaling to help them, really guide them through, during a retreat, an emotional Ayurvedic psychology transformation process. That's what my Panchakarma technique program really was, in the last 10, 15 years of my practice, because I closed my Panchakarma center in 2013. And so this woman came to me and she said she had she had a goiter in her neck the size of a grapefruit that you couldn't miss. Her neck was really swollen and her thyroid was really swollen. And a doctor wanted to radiate her thyroid. She didn't want to do that, so she came to me. We did Panchakarma. After her third nausea treatment, she said, I was sitting there writing in my journal. I had this epiphany where I was abused when I was 14 years old. And I completely blocked that out of my mind for decades. And I hadn't thought about it forever. And she said what was really weird about this awareness, this epiphany that I was having, was I wasn't so struck by the trauma itself. I was sort of blown away I was looking at this happy-go-lucky child. And then I looked at the event and I looked at this kind of hyper-vigilant 90-hour-a-week corporate executive perfectionist who was just go, 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 go to make everything perfect. And she saw that behavior was based on this trauma that happened, and that young, happy-go-lucky kid was gone. And she said, I just desperately wanted to have that back. So she looked at that life before and then the life after, and she said, it wasn't worth 25 years of my life. And she was able to just literally drop it and let it go. True story, within a week of Panchakarma, her thyroid goiter was gone. Her numbers came down a couple hundred points at that point. She had hyperthyroidism. And after about 6 or 9 months, her thyroid normalized. About 5, 6 years later, I ran across her at a Christmas party in Denver. She came running up to me with 2 little kids, and she wanted me to meet because, of course, she said they, wouldn't be there if she had not kind of unraveled all of this stress, So that's what Ayurveda was really so beautiful. It was all about, like really getting to the root cause and having techniques that really do that. So if you want to learn more about that, go to my website, type in Nasya, Nasya, and you'll get that article. You can read about it and go from there. Okay, so that's the how we hold on to emotional trauma, and the brain lymphatic system plays a role in that. But the pump for that lymphatic system is your diaphragm. And your diaphragm is a muscle that is so critically important for pumping the trash out of your head. It pumps the cerebral spinal fluid, which is like a brainwashing fluid from your brain. And if your diaphragm isn't working well, you're not going to digest well, you're not going to detoxify your brain well. Their studies show that if you actually strengthen your diaphragm, I wrote an article called Breathe Away Your Heartburn, You can reverse, if you strengthen your diaphragm, you can reverse your heartburn, GERD, reflux, and indigestion. There's about 14, 15 studies that show that you can do that just by strengthening your diaphragm. But when you go to the doctor, they don't tell you that, They just give you Prilosec or antacid, right? But the idea is that the diaphragm is intimately connected with your digestive function. The diaphragm also pumps your cerebrospinal fluid, the trash, out of your head. And one study with elite athletes, 91% of them did not have a diaphragm relaxing and contracting fully. So turns out that when you are under stress, you change how you breathe. And in short order, that breathing pattern becomes normal to you. You have no idea it became normal, but it became normal to you. You're still breathing that way. And then another stress comes along, that becomes normal. Another that becomes normal. Next thing you know, over the years, you're starting to shallow breathe and shallow breathe and shallow breathe. Your rib cage has a job, which is squeeze down on your heart and your lungs 26,000 times a day. Its only job in life is to get the air out. The only reason why it opens up is because your diaphragm contracts fully. But if 91% of athletes don't have a diaphragm contracting fully, really none of us do. And since we're constantly bombarded by stress, we slowly become more shallow breathers. And that, I have many, many articles on breathing, and I'm not going to dive into that. I'm going to try to stay focused on the lymph, but I can tell you that the breathing is so critical for your optimal health, not only for heartburn and GERD and reflux, because I talk about that because it has impact on your digestion, but the breathing, the diaphragm is the #1 pump of your entire lymphatic system. So I've written articles, one article called The Best Diaphragmatic Breathing Exercises I'd love for you to type up on my website. Another one called Lateral or Horizontal Breathing, where you learn how to get your rib cage to move to the side as opposed to just up and down, which is really important. There's the article called Strengthen Your Lungs Now. There's another article called Breathe Away Your Heartburn. There's breathing articles on breath retention and Kumbhak and breath holding techniques and the science behind that. It's a rabbit hole of knowledge and information on my website there about really taking a deep dive into all the science behind it, not just the how-to. It's all the science is there, and that's why I think it's so valuable. It's really a library of ancient wisdom and the science behind it. So you go, oh wow, this has been used for thousands of years, and you get modern science to prove it. Maybe we should, take a look at that. So it's very, very important for us to, simply put, start breathing deeply, using all 5 lobes of our lungs. And I'll give you a little hint of how this works. There's the first step before you can do pranayama breathing techniques that we all have heard about and know about, and be successful at that. You have to have a rib cage that's actually moving and a diaphragm that's actually functional. And interesting, Western medicine wrote articles, many studies about what's called maximum inspiratory breathing techniques, which are techniques to strengthen your diaphragm, which we don't see that much talk about in Ayurveda, because I guess back in the day, well, people had much more resilient rib cages, a much more resilient floor of the pelvis, and a much more functional diaphragm. Why? Partly because we didn't sit around all day long. Like we sit in couches and we lounge and we eat all slouched over, where most people, chairs were only invented 5,000 years ago. We went on this planet for over 280,000 years as humans, right? So, and when they did make the chairs, it was for the kings and the queens. Only very special people got a chair, right? Now we have all kinds, everybody's got a chair. And then we slouch, and when you slouch, the rib cage gets pushed into your diaphragm, pushes in a downward position, and next thing you know, you've got the diaphragm pushed into a already pre-contracted position, so it can't fully contract and suck the air in, open up your rib cage becomes tight. Next thing you know, you become a shallow breather, and that creates more rib cage rigidity, which means the ribs aren't moving and pumping lymph the way they should. Diaphragm's not moving, pumping lymph the way it should, and that creates all these lymphatic concerns. So that's where the diaphragm becomes so critical. And all that extra weight around your belly, diaphragm specifically pumps lymph out of that. Women with breast cancer have been shown to have more congestion of the anterior diaphragmatic lymph nodes, again, because that pump is broken. And so I can't emphasize enough the power of breathing techniques. There's one technique called Durga Pranayam, which is a breathing technique where you fill your belly, always through the nose, then your chest, and your upper chest. As you continue one inhale, and that's one of the techniques that I'd like you to know about, is you fill your belly, chest, upper chest, and out. That's the first step. If you can do that, then you can do what I call flossing your diaphragm, where you take your arms up and you breathe in, same way. Arms up, reach for the sky, belly first, chest, upper chest. And as you reach to the sky as high as you can, you fill as much as air as you possibly can through your nose, and you'll feel a pull into your diaphragm. And you do 10, up and down. And you do 10 to the side. Belly slow, belly chest, belly upper chest, in, up, over, and then back down. And you do 10 on both sides. There's a whole article and video about that. And there's many articles and videos. I could spend 2 hours just teaching you breathing techniques for your lymphatic system, but that would be a first one to just get you started. I call that sort of the calisthenics for your diaphragm. Once this rib cage gets moving, then the pranayama, the more subtle, gentle techniques can really begin to work for you. So now let's talk about the lymphatic system in terms of how it really works on the inside of your intestinal tract and what helps it work better. Well, if you have undigested proteins and fats that are not digested, they come into your intestinal tract and they irritate the lining. They can inflame the intestinal tract, and they can over time congest the lymphatic system. And that can cause a sort of a dirty filter effect where you start getting more of that congestion around your abdomen. And that becomes really, it's a lymphatic concern. It isn't like you have to have a ripped abs. You know, a little bit of belly fat is normal. It's the visceral fat around your organs that becomes the problem. When the visceral belly fat becomes so much, it starts to go around your organs. That becomes a problem. So I don't want you to think that you have to have the ripped ab to be healthy. That's not true. It's our culture, but it isn't necessarily true. Thousands of years ago, you didn't see ripped abs people. If you look at the ancient statues, people were thin, but they weren't like, sculpted like that. There was just a natural, healthy amount of good fat. So I want to give you permission to be healthy, okay? And not necessarily rail skinny with 8% body fat. That's not a requirement, okay? So when you look at nature in the springtime, there's a harvest that is very austere. The end of the spring is a very difficult time. It's a fasting time of the year. It's a time where there's not a lot of food to be had. So that calorie restriction is a natural lymphatic boosting technique. Now, during the fall, during the massive harvest and the feasting during the holidays, which were always sort of holiday times because there was always a massive harvest at the end of the fall. Everything was growing and ripe. There were root vegetables. There was just all the fruits and vegetables. The grains were there. There was so much food at the end of the fall. We overstuffed ourselves, stored weight for reserve fuel and insulation to make it through the winter. Then comes spring, we fast and we burn all that off. We detoxify all that. Great time for us to do detoxification and cleansing and all that. Powerful tools for lymphatic cleansing, right? So that would happen. Then the first things that come out of the ground, if you look at the deer, they're going to dig up your garden, they're going to go after that dandelion root because those dandelion roots are bitter roots, and they're going to scrub the little villi in your intestinal tract, clean them out. And inside those little villi are the collecting ducts of your lymphatic system called the lacteals. And they are designed to suck up anything that's not properly digested. Gluten will end up there. There's enzymes for gluten in your lymphatic system. So we were sort of designed to have a little secondary barrier for that gluten if it got through the intestinal tract. It's called DPP4. So But if it was overwhelming with Wonder Bread and bad bread and breakfast and lunch and dinner every day of the year with wheat, it's not how it was designed in nature. You only got wheat for a couple of months at the end of the summer, and it was really good bread, and there wasn't that much of it because you were eating the wheat berries. So it wasn't like the quantity and the processed nature and the frequency that we have today. And that's the real problem. And then so you end up with some of that wheat getting into the lymphatic system around the belly. It can get circulating into the system, and it can give you brain fog and thyroid congestion and all these things that we know is true, but we blame the wheat as opposed to the lining of the intestinal tract and the inability to break down the wheat upstream of your digestion. And you can stop eating wheat and be fine. Never eat wheat again, you'll be fine. It's not a requirement in life to eat wheat. Although I did write a book called Eat Wheat, but the idea there was it's a canary in the coal mine. It's telling you something's wrong here. It's not the wheat, per se. Something's wrong on the line of the digestive tract. And we also have a quiz an article called the Digestive Health Quiz, which you can take and ask yourself questions about every aspect of your digestion and the symptoms you might have in digestion. And that will kind of give you information about where your digestive system might be broken and what herbs and foods and diet and things that you can do to treat that. So after the bitter roots scrub the villi of your intestinal tract, then come the spring greens, those early spring, sort of that fluorescent bright green that's different than summer green. It's happening right now. I'm recording this video in the early part of May, where everything is just bright green in Colorado, and of course Colorado can be very brown and many times most of the year, except not right now. It's just green. So it's so beautiful, and that green is rich in chlorophyll, rich in micronutrients, hundreds of times more nutrition than the full-grown plant. So when you're gobbling up that fertilizes the now clean villi from the bitter roots that we're supposed to eat, the dandelion root tea, the burdock root tea, the turmeric, the ginger, we're supposed to clean all those villi out. And then the greens come to fertilize, and then the next step is clean your lymphatic system, which are the more of the summer greens. The lettuces start to come, the spinach is early, the arugula starts to kick in, and then of course the berries start to come, and they are rich in antioxidants, and all the antioxidants work through the lymphatic system as well to flush and clean that lymphatic system. So in the spring you have like a 1-2-3 punch. You have clean the villi, fertilize with the greens, and then move, and then also support the function of that with the leafy greens and the berries, which are also lymphatic movers. Also, spring time to, you're moving out of some winter hibernation. You're moving, hopefully hydrating, and that also is critically important for your lymphatic system as well. And my first book, Body, Mind, and Sport, was about nose breathing exercise and all the research we did on nose breathing versus mouth breathing exercise. When you breathe through your nose, you activate your diaphragm, which again is that lymphatic pump. When you breathe through your nose while you sleep, you're activating that lymphatic pump, your diaphragm. When your mouth is open at night, you're not breathing deeply, you're not activating your diaphragm. So that's why all that is critically important. And I've written articles about the science why we should be a nose breather while we sleep, and techniques of actually how you can tape your mouth without having to buy expensive mouth tape, and also how to nose breathe. Many articles about the science behind nose breathing versus mouth breathing based on the research we published many years, early 1990s, published that in the International Journal of Neuroscience. And all that research is there for, again, deeper dive into the lymphatic system. Okay, so the next thing are those are the basic foods for the lymph, but let's talk about this idea of nitric oxide. Nitric oxide is a molecule, like I said, that won the Nobel Prize, that won the Nobel Prize in 1998 and in chemistry, and it was the panacea molecule. And it has to do with vasodilation. And it's one of the things that dials down as we age. It's linked to high blood pressure, it's linked to type 2 diabetes, it's linked to Alzheimer's, it's linked to cardiovascular disease, arterial plaque, because the arteries get tight and they are not vasodilating the way they should. There's a ton of research, a lot of this research done by Nathan Bryan, who's a PhD researcher who's spent his entire life on studying nitric oxide and has come up with some really great strategies. He's written a book on it. So that might be something you might want to look at if you want to dive deeper into this. I've got an article coming out about the Ayurvedic understanding of nitric oxide. So it turns out that there are certain foods that boost nitric oxide. And if you have a phone and you have social media, you've probably seen nitric oxide articles about taking beets, and beets are really critically important. And I'm a big fan of apple, beets, and celery together because they're both cholagogues for the lymphatic system, but they also naturally increase nitric oxide. Beets particularly is a powerful vasodilator. It has nitrites in it, and those natural nitrites and nitrates actually create vasodilation, and they're really important. So let me give you a list of some of the foods that support your lymphatic system. And if that can vasodilate, it can function better as a detoxification pathway. If it doesn't function well, you're going to get toxins building up in your skin, making your skin look less lively. It's going to build up in your joints, making your joints ache. It's going to make you tired or fatigued, give you brain fog, headaches, migraine headaches. Food intolerances. When you can't eat this food, it's because that food wasn't broken down properly. It got into the lymphatic system, and that created a histamine sort of immune event in your lymphatic system. And that's why your lymph swells, you get tired, lethargic, and get some type of immune reaction to it. So lots to talk about there, but let's dive into it. Probably the best food that you can eat, other than beets, which are great, and beet greens also really good for your lymphatic system, is arugula. Arugula is one of the highest in foods with nitrates in them, and those nitrates convert into nitric oxide. And spinach is also high, and leafy greens are really high. Garlic and onions are also really good for your lymphatic system, and this is the connection between your lymph and the nitric oxide production. So that's going to create, move your lymph in a kind of a decongesting your lymph kind of way, but also get everything to open up. It's also, citrus fruits are also really good. Lemons, oranges, and grapefruits. We'll talk a little more about that. Watermelons, watermelons, because they have citrulline. Citrulline is another precursor to nitric oxide, along with arginine, which a lot of these foods have arginine and citrulline are the two main precursors for nitric oxide. There's watermelon, pomegranate, celery, and parsley. Berries. Again, we talked about those lymphatic agents. Even nuts and seeds. They're rich in the arginine piece of the puzzle. And of course, fermented foods, sauerkraut, yogurt, kimchi, also really, really good as well. Now, now when we talk about herbs and that are really good for the lymphatic system, there are just so many herbs. And what was really interesting that when I was looking at Dr. Nathan Bryan's research is that he found that whenever you add alcohol to anything, it destroys your production of nitric oxide, like mouthwash. He says destroys your production of nitric oxide. That's why in Ayurveda they didn't use mouthwash, they used oil. And you swish your mouth with a combination of coconut oil and sesame, and that would saponify and create an antiseptic that would kill the bad bugs, but leave an environment for the good bugs to proliferate. And we have good science now to back that up. But when you put alcohol, like 99% bacteria are killed with mouthwash, is that what you really want, is to kill the microbiome in your mouth? And anyway, so when you do that, that becomes a problem. And so whenever you soak herbs in alcohol, making them into an extract, they are going to produce zero nitric oxide for you. But studies show that when you actually use the whole herb, some herbs more than others, the whole plant will actually provide for you a boosting effect on nitric oxide, just like beets will give you nitric oxide in the whole plant form, and arugula will give you nitric oxide production in the whole plant form. But herbs, because they're sort of more concentrated culinary kind of herbs that were used as part of the diet for thousands of years, they also are shown to boost nitric oxide. So I'm going to give you a list of some of the herbs that are really boosted, and this is in the notes that are in the podcast notes at LifeSpa.com. And the first herb is an Ayurvedic herb called Mangista. And Mangista is an herb that I think about as the classic Ayurvedic lymphatic destagnator, but it's also a powerful nitric oxide booster. There's an herb called Brahmi Brain. Brahmi Brain is Centella asiatica, also called Goda-Kola, and that has been shown to be a brain lymphatic mover for microcirculation, cellulite, that the really microcirculation between the cells to keep that lymph moving from the extracellular fluid into the venous or lymphatic systems to take the trash out. Another herb we have is something called lymph vein HP. Lymph vein HP is citrus peel. And as I mentioned, the foods that actually help boost lymphatic flow and nitric oxide are citrus, oranges, grapefruits, lemons, all the citrus fruits. And the citrus fruits have bioflavonoids. And the bioflavonoids are predominantly found in the peel, which we always throw away. But turns out that when you take some of the bioflavonoids out, either eat the peel, which is completely fine to do, take a navel orange, cut it up in little pieces with the orange and the pith and the peel, and eat the whole thing, that provides you with a whole surge of bioflavonoids. Two of those bioflavonoids, called diosmin and hesperidin, have been shown to be extremely powerful for microcirculation, cellulite, hemorrhoids, anytime where the skin can't really take out its trash very, very well. These bioflavonoids help to enhance healing and repair of those tissues and lymphatic movement. The drainage system of those tissues are very, very important. So we have something called a lymph kit, which has the Mangista. We have something, the Brahmi Brain, or the Centella asiatica for the brain lymphatic system. It has the lymph vein HP, which is the citrus peel. You can also just eat your oranges, all the oranges, the whole thing. We also have something called neem and neem boost. All of these, again, are nitric oxide boosters, which is super cool, because this is the lymph kit that we put together many, many years ago. And now we're looking at the science to say, oh my goodness, these herbs are also not only helping decongest the lymphatic system, they're boosting the nitric oxide, which increases the vasodilation and function of the lymphatic system, which allows it, according to the studies, to respond to an immune event more effectively and more appropriately, which is pretty cool. And neem is in there, and neem is a kind of another antiseptic for the bad microbes, but it's also a repopulation agent for the good microbes, and also supports lymphatic health. There's an herb in there called Lymph Cleanse, which has red root, anything that makes your white shirt turn red or black, like a blackberry or a blueberry or a beet or a pomegranate, or anything. An herb like Mangista is Rubia cordifolia. It's a red root. It'll dye your clothes. Red root is the Western herb similar to Mangista, because it'll dye your clothes red. These red agents, colorful things that would dye your clothes, that's going to be a powerful mover for your lymph. Anything you spill pomegranate juice on you, that's for the lymphatic system, just so you know. And also all the greens and the hydration, very critical. The other piece of the puzzle there in our lymph kit is something called a lymphatic massage oil, because studies show that when you massage, you have skin-associated lymph. So when you massage yourself, you're actually enhancing that skin-associated lymphatic tissue. And the microbiome on your skin, more concentrated under your arms and groin, different areas, but still on your skin, those bugs eat oil. Your body produces sebum, which is oil that feeds that microbiome. When you put oil on your skin every day, you're actually feeding your own microbiome, which is really cool. And you're delivering nutrition through the skin. And you're also putting oil on a very dry tissue, particularly if it's dried out. And that will calm the sensory stimulation and dampen the whole sensory experience, allow you to feel a level of peace and calm. And that's beautiful too, because the more calm you are, the more everything functions better, right? So I'm going to give you a list of the herbs that are now, the lymph kit are the ones that I felt are the highlights for the nitric oxide, but there are other herbs as well. There's Tulsi, which you've all heard of Tulsi. Tulsi tea would be very good, or that's herb Tulsi. Ginger, turmeric is a natural nitric oxide lymphatic mover. Amalaki, which they call it's a citrus fruit. Again, it's citrus. You get the benefits of the peel of the citrus, just like you would an orange, which is really cool, and all the vitamin C and the benefits of that. Googling or Google is an herb that actually helps the body burn fat. The other ones are fenugreek and cinnamon and shilajit, and that just happened to be the main ingredients of our beet cleanse, which is an herb to help increase, it has beets, cinnamon, shilajit, and fenugreek, all of which are powerful nitric oxide movers, powerful lymphatic movers, but powerful herbal liver, gallbladder, bile duct decongestors to get that liver and bile duct to really kind of kick in and really move, which is really cool. Other herbs like ashwagandha, triphala, bacopa, guduchi, all of those, again, are powerful lymphatic movers. So there you have it. And now let's just dive into some of the questions here. If there was only one thing to do to support your lymphatic system, what would that be? Well, if there was only one thing that I would do, I would say probably the most important thing is hydration and movement, right? You have to stay hydrated. It's like a river. Your lymph is like a river. And if the river is dry, it's bad. If it's not moving, it's bad. So that is the number one thing that you can do. What are some of the side effects of poor lymphatic drainage? I think we covered that. All the symptoms of tiredness, joint aches, fatigue, brain fog, headaches, skin rashes, hypersensitivity reactions to your food, pain in your body that moves from one joint to the next, tiredness in the morning, lethargy, swelling, holding on to water, all that. Is brain fatigue and fogginess upon waking in the morning caused by lymphatic drainage during the night? Absolutely sure it is. We talked about that. What should be addressed first? The lymph or improving digestion, or i.e. bile flow? Well, excuse me. Well, I would say that when you understand how the lymph works in sequence, that's a great question. You have your digestion, which makes the lymph in the first place. In Ayurveda, said it's called the Ahara Rasa. The Ahara Rasa is the first food bolus that's created. And that Ahara Rasa becomes Rasa Dhatu, or the Rasa tissue, or the lymphatic tissue. And that converts into blood, which converts into muscle, converts into fat, into bone, to nerve, to reproductive tissue. So, and the final result of that whole process of making all these tissues is a substance which is called ojas. And ojas is what they call the physiological expression of consciousness, a sort of prana or life force. And even in Nathan Bryan's book on nitric oxide, a PhD researcher, he talked about the nitric oxide being a form of chi or prana. It might actually be a form of, again, ojas is this final product of digestion. And from the Ayurvedic perspective, it takes 30 days to complete. And that might actually be your nitric oxide. There are many chemicals that I think I have a candidate list of what ojas might be in your body. One of them is melatonin. It's another podcast we could dive deep into. Nitric oxide, and maybe your life force or prana. But for now, we'll just leave that be. But the point is that so the first step in this process is your digestion. So you always have to troubleshoot your digestion. Take that digestive health quiz we have on my site, find out where your digestion is broken, or read my Eat Wheat book, which is really nothing but a rehab guide for your broken down digestive parts, really super simple. And then from there, once you fix our treating digestion, you can't not fix your diaphragm. You have to fix that. If you don't fix your diaphragm, that's the number one pump of your lymph. Nothing's going to get better. So if you don't breathe well, you're just going to slowly age faster and faster. And you're going to be elderly, and all of a sudden you're going to be walking around really frail with your mouth open, just really frail. I was in a restaurant about 1.5 years ago, and as I was coming in, a couple of elderly folks were coming out. was like a group of them, like maybe like 4, something like that. And they all were very frail, mouths open, red faced, really fragile and frail coming out. And I was helping them get out to the doors. And I was like, man, if anybody would have just told them, all you got to do is breathe 5 minutes a day. And the heartburn, GERD, reflux, and indigestion, studies show, would be gone. Studies show that just by breathing for 5 minutes a day properly, like what I kind of gave you some insight into, can reverse your blood pressure 3 minutes a day better than the Western medication can, according to studies done here at CU Boulder. Studies show it pumps your lymphatic system and takes out the trash around all the extra weight around your belly, the brain fog, the cognitive decline, the age-related cognitive decline, the skin-associated lymph is now breaking out and it's red and frail and fragile. All this has to do with how you breathe. And the breathing is pumping your lymph. You see, it's all connected. And the breathing is specifically intimately related to how you digest, according to 15 studies on how just breathing reverses your heartburn, GERD, and reflux, right? So I would treat them all at once, but know the order. It's digestion, breathing, and then lymphatic flow. And in your digestion is your bile. It's a great question because it really does tie it all together, that we have to look at the whole body, not just a part, right? What does Ayurvedic medicine say about the flow and exit of lymphatic congestion? Well, interesting thing about the lymphatic system is not a closed system, like your blood is somewhat of a closed system. The lymph is oozing out of your blood. The cerebrospinal fluid is oozing lymph out from the spine into the lymph around your belly and back and forth. It seems to be kind of a loosey-goosey system, so it has many exits throughout the body. Your skin is an exit, as a major exit ramp for you. And that's important for the way that the lymphatic system functions, and probably has a lot to do with the idea of nitric oxide, because that's one of the vasodilation agents, the vasodilation agent that allows immune cytokines and immune activators to get in and out of your lymph to fight the battle it's fighting to fight. It's like it gives it access, gives the immune system access to what it needs. That's what the nitric oxide is doing, which is why all this nitric oxide stuff is really cutting edge and really interesting, actually. How similar or dissimilar are rasa, dhatu, and lymph? They're the same. The rasa, dhatu, and lymph are the same. If you're trying to optimize one, are you simultaneously optimizing the other? Yes. Like I just mentioned a minute ago, the ahara rasa, which is the first lymphatic fluid, starts in your digestion with your food. It crosses the intestinal tract through the lacteals into the lymphatic, the gut-associated lymph, and that's where the lion's share of the lymph is. And from there, it moves into it becomes blood and bone and nerve and all the other tissues in the body. Is it true that the lymph only drains when one lays on the left side? It's true that when you're lying on your side, you have more efficient lymphatic drainage. So lying on your side or even on your belly, it turns out you have better lymphatic drainage, but on your back, not so much actually. And that tends to open up your mouth when you do that, and you tend to snore more when you're on your back. So lying on your side is actually a preferred position. Left side, always better for the lymph. I wrote an article why you should sleep on your left side, because there's what's called the thoracic duct, which is the main duct for lymphatic drainage on the left side of your body. So when you lie there, things can pool into that big river that can take the lymph back to your heart more efficiently and more easily. Does placing your legs up against a wall drain your lymph? Yeah, anytime you do inverted postures, you're going to get lymphatic movement for sure, because lymph is going against gravity. So anytime you give the body a break with gravity, that would be great, right? Does congested lymph contribute to fatty liver and gallstones? Indirectly. The problem with the liver is the liver makes bile, and the bile duct or the gallbladder is a sac of bile that's 25 times concentrated bile, which is a huge amount of bile for digesting the intestines of a woolly mammoth. And when you killed a buffalo, you had to eat all the fatty stuff had to be eaten right then and there, brains, intestines, all that fat. And that had to be eaten right away because it would go bad. But the meat, the muscle meat, could be dried and eat later. So the fats were consumed in an evolutionary sense at huge quantities and then nothing for a while. And that allowed the gallbladder time to replenish the bile that it had. But we evolved to have a big stack of bile. Now, the amount of fat we eat today doesn't come close to contracting that gallbladder the way it should, to really empty it and keep it really viable. And as a result of that, the liver can the gallbladder can be more vulnerable to some congestion, right? Now, the other piece of that puzzle is that the foods that we eat, particularly with, processed oils, bleach, boiled, deodorized, seed oils. We all know seed oils are bad these days, but the mechanism for that most people don't know. When you put a seed oil, which is put into a loaf of bread, the bread never gets hard anymore. The bugs don't eat it. It doesn't go bad. Why? Because the bugs don't want to eat that oil. Even though that's what they eat for a living, to stay alive, they eat oil, but not that processed oil. So you put it in a loaf of bread, the bread never goes bad. You put that bread in your mouth, the oil in that bread, the bugs in your gut don't want to eat either. So where does the oil go nobody wants to eat? To your liver, gallbladder, case bile sludge, congestion, liver, gallbladder. And that's why the number one abdominal surgery in America today is take your gallbladder out. Something that never happened before, partly because of the diet that we had doesn't have exercise the gallbladder the way it should, like it did years ago. And secondly, simply because of the bad oils that are congesting it. Now, when the lymphatic system is congested, there's going to be a lot more trash going back into the heart, back in circulation, back to the liver, and the liver is going to do the detoxification, right? So that now the liver is overwhelmed with that detox and may not be able to do the job it could. So indirectly, that could have an effect. That lymphatic congestion can have an effect on liver function. Liver function could obviously have an effect on gallbladder function. So from that perspective, I think yes. Is there a direct connection between the lymphatic system and the issues with the nervous system? 100%. We know that the brain lymphatic system and your cerebrospinal fluid washes up and down your whole central nervous system. It's a lubricant and a washing fluid for your spinal cord and your brain. So when your brain is not breathing, therefore not pumping that cerebrospinal fluid up and down your brain, or not moving, or you're sedentary, all these things have a direct effect on the lymph, which has a direct effect on your nervous system. Anxiety, depression, cognitive decline, inflammation, infection, all that when the brain lymphatic system is congested. So absolutely. For someone with chronic infections or immunity like Lyme, Babesia, and mono, what is the most effective approach to get the lymphatic system back on track? What I treat, number one is troubleshoot the digestion, fix the digestive system. You got to stop the snow from falling. You can't be shoveling snow in a snowstorm when you're trying to treat Lyme. You got to stop the incoming. Your stomach is a barrier from bad bugs getting into your system, and so is your intestinal tract. And if those two are broken, then you're going to be more vulnerable to a chronic reoccurring infection, right? So that has to be fixed, step one. Number two, your diaphragm, your breathing. If you're not pumping, then your brain lymphatic system is not going to actually move. And if the master computer is congested, it's not going to send the appropriate amount of fire trucks to the immune event for the Lyme disease or whatever. So brain lymphatic cleansing can also be critical as well, because many times with Lyme conditions, I often see an emotional component, a trauma-related history of trauma, old emotional trauma that we held onto in our brain as a survival technique, right? If you go into a cave and when you're 10 and you get chased out by a bear, you're never going to go back. You can be 99 years old, you'll always remember that cave. It's a species survival thing that we have to remember trauma. But a lot of it, we don't, we remember it for a while. When we were a child, it might have served us to stay out of harm's way. But as we get older, we can let it go. But it doesn't oftentimes go away, that we don't let it go. And so these Ayurvedic techniques were designed to, breathing and the nausea therapy is designed to get it to go away so you can be free from that. So that's the other piece of the puzzle. And then our lymph kit, all the Ayurvedic herbs to get the lymphatic system to move, are all critical from the nitric oxide perspective, from the lymph congestion perspective, and strict digestion to make sure you stop the snow from falling so you don't have chronic dumping of undigested proteins and fats congesting your lymphatic system. And then the diaphragm breathing, for the pump of your lymphatic system, all that ties together. So you have to treat the whole piece of the puzzle. What is the link between breast cancer and lymph congestion? Well, your breasts, of course, are lymphatic tissues. Well, other herb I didn't research for this particular talk, but I've written articles about it, called iodine. It's deficient in many childbearing women, which is interesting that childbearing women are the most common demographic for iodine deficiency, although many of us are deficient in iodine, but that's the number one demographic. And so breast cancer, the iodine was the antiseptic of the 1800s. It is a lymphatic mover. It's an anti-cancer agent. It's an antioxidant agent. It's a lymphatic mover. So that's something to consider. Get your iodine checked and make sure you're not deficient in iodine. But everything else we talked about, the congestion of the anterior diaphragmatic lymph nodes with more common in breast cancer patients, is also critical. I wrote an article on breathing techniques for breast health, so you can read that article on my website as well. How do we restore and improve lymphatic system after radiation treatments? Well, that's iodine and turmeric and tulsi. Iodine, tulsi, and amalaki. Those are the herbs you would take. Iodine, tulsi, turmeric, and iodine. I've written articles about the science and how all those protect you against radiation. In fact, very, very important. What are the best herbs and foods to support the lymphatic system? I went through that. I think the herbs on the lymph kit are probably the ones I really like, because you have the mangista, which is the number one lymphatic decongester for the lymph vessels. The lymph cleanse, which has the red root, which is for the lymph nodes. It has the lymph vein HP, which is the citrus peel with the bioflavonoids for the microcirculation, that kind of subtle circulation and lymphatic flow. It has the neem to support a healthy microbiome, health of function of the intestinal lymphatic systems, as well as lymphatic support. The Brahmi brain for the brain lymphatic system. And then, of course, the lymphatic oil for the skin-associated lymphatic system. So I think those are the ones I've used. And of the foods that I mentioned, all of those foods, I listed a massive list of foods: arugula, all your leafy green vegetables, beets, really, really good. Your berries, your leafy greens, even the bitter roots are really, really important for the lymphatic system, because that supports intestinal health. Is there an Abhyanga sequence that directly supports lymphatic drainage? You know, generally speaking, any massage is going to give you lymphatic support. But in Ayurveda, there is a specific technique called Garshana, which is putting a raw silk glove on and doing a very vigorous massage going up against your heart, towards your heart, because the lymph goes back towards your heart that way. Always rubbing this way, back towards your heart. And that's either with a wool mitt or a raw silk mitt. We use the raw silk mitts. It's called Garshana. And the studies show that when you actually do this, you create static electricity. And the static electricity was used to alkalize the blood and the lymph to get more lymphatic system moving. Back in the early 1900s, in sort of this roaring 20s of health clinics around the world, around the country, they found that they had static electricity clinics where you'd go and get zapped. I don't think people lasted, because probably people didn't like the feeling of it, but it actually alkalized their system, and gave them lymphatic drainage. It also has been shown in more recent studies to increase ozone, and ozone is also a natural lymphatic mover. So there's good science to know why the silk gloves enhance lymphatic flow, in addition to just the basic exfoliation. So that's kind of a cool thing as well. You can read, I wrote an article about Garshana and all that science. Just type in Garshana, Garshana, into my website. Let's see here. What are the primary lymphatic junctions of the body where we should emphasize massage? Well, your belly being the lion's share of the lymph in your body, very important. A visceral massage, so important for your body. Under your arms, your groins, your feet, your hands, your head. So your head, your hands, your feet, particularly the bottoms of your feet, under your arms, in your groin. The joints, of course, are good. The belly probably, and the head are probably the two most important places. Giving yourself a nice belly massage and a head massage every day would be primary. What role does dehydration play in lymphatic flow? of course, lymphatic flow is dependent on hydration. How much water should you drink? I would suggest that you test your body with half your ideal body weight in ounces of really good water per day and see how you feel after 3 or 4 days. And you have to pee a lot, of course, but generally that's just a rehabilitation for your bladder muscle control. So you actually have a stronger and more functional bladder, and it will work better when you use it as opposed to just little bits here and there. Can headaches be caused by lymph not circulating? You know, migraine headaches are a vasodilation headache, which means that the natural movement of the cerebrospinal fluid into your head is not functioning as well. So the body can't get the trash out of the head as well. So the brain vasodilates and creates a pressure-related headache. That's directly linked to brain lymphatic flow. A tension headache is coming from tension, and that tension can cause muscles to be tight, and that can also cause lymphatic congestion. So from either the migraine headache or the tension headache, you're both looking at possible lymphatic involvement for sure. That's why that vigorous head massage, so good for that area, or massage of any kind really is so good for that, for the lymphatic system. Is swelling of the lower legs, ankles, and lack of mobility, menopause related to lymph? Of course, anytime you swell, hold on to water is really important. How does PMS and menopause affect lymph? Well, I wrote an article called "It May Not Be Hormonal." It may not be hormonal. And the reason why I wrote that article was because I noticed that a lot of times women would come in with PMS symptoms where they would swell, their breasts would become tender, they would break out. You know, breasts are lymph, skin-associated lymph is breaking out. They're tired, lethargic. The brain lymph's congested, maybe causing some irritability around the cycle, PMS-like symptoms. And I started looking at these symptoms like lymphatic symptoms, and I started digging into the research, and I noticed that there was a pre-lymphatic detoxification that took place from ovulation to the menstrual flow. And during that period, the second half of the cycle, there's a major dumping of premenstrual lymph through the premenstrual waste through the lymphatic system as sort of a way to help the body take the onus of reproduction away or menstruation away from just that 4 days, cycle. And if you're dumping that waste into an already congested lymphatic system, and this is supported by the rise of progesterone during this period, it can create more lymphatic congestion. But if the lymph's already congested because of digestive problems or lymph concerns, your breast will swell during that period because the lymph was already, you're dumping waste into an already congested system, it's going to swell, you're going to break out. So I started giving the Mangista herb, which is the Ayurvedic herb for lymph, at higher doses in the second half of the cycle. And I still use that to this day. I've been doing it for decades now. And I see some significant improvement in PMS-related symptoms or heavy flow or just PMS kind of symptoms or bloating or all that by giving the body some lymphatic detoxification support for the 2 weeks prior to the cycle. It's a great question. Thanks for asking that. Does lymph detoxify via the skin? Yes, 100%. That's what the skin-associated lymph is, and it's not any particular region, it's everywhere in your skin. However, areas like underneath your arms and your groin and your feet, which get hot and sweaty, kind of become more vulnerable, and they're also, feet are fighting against gravity. Those things can, become more problematic. And then the next question, where do I find out more about the lymphatic system? Like I said, if you're watching this on YouTube or on my website at LifeSpa.com, there's a whole stack of notes that you can read with links to deeper, more articles, or you just go to LifeSpa.com and type in lymph, type in brain lymph, type in glymph, type in anything related to lymph, and you'll get a whole laundry list of articles in our library and videos there as well to dive into. I've got an ebook on the lymphatic system, which is also free, and then we can go from there. And then the last question here is what degree of lymph congestion impacts pain in your body? And I can tell you that pain is commonly caused by lymphatic system. There's so many studies done on just long, slow, deep breathing, which creates a parasympathetic activation, which creates a neurological calm, which naturally creates a vasodilation, probably regulated by more nitric oxide flow, that actually allows the lymphatic system to take the trash away better. And we have hard science to show that long, slow, deep breathing will release your pain in study after study after study after study. All right, you guys. So like I said, go to my website, LifeSpa.com, and read all the lymphatic articles. I hope you enjoyed this podcast. I hope this gave you some more information. I know it was a lot of information, but like I said, there's articles for you to dive deep into, or other videos that are a little bit more focused on a particular topic if you want to dive into any one of those. All right, you guys, thanks for listening. I'm Dr. John Douillard. Hi, everybody. I just want to take a minute and tell you what we do here at LifeSpa.com. You know, I've been in practice now for 40 years, 38 of them have been practicing Ayurvedic medicine full-time. For the last 20 years, I've been writing articles and doing videos on the ancient medical wisdom of Ayurveda with the modern science. You know, if something's been around for 1,000 years, still practiced today, and you have modern science to prove it, boy, I really feel like that's something we should all be taking a look at. And that's what we do at LifeSpa.com, and all that information is for free. So just go to LifeSpa.com and search in your health topic, and you'll get the information, the article that you need, hopefully that will help you. While you're there, check out our Ayurvedic store. You can get there through LifeSpa.com or go to store.lifespa.com. And there we have all of our organic Ayurvedic herbs, organic skincare line, more books, tapes, knowledge that we give you is all there at our store. All of our cleansing kits are there in our store. All of our herbs are whole herbs with the natural occurring microbiome, the way it came out of the soil. And that's critically important, because if I took the bugs out of you, you'd be completely different. We take the bugs away from a plant, like sterilizing, making an extract, or spraying your food with pesticides. You lose significant benefit of that plant. And that's why we use the whole plant with the natural occurring microbiome. So check us out, learn more about what we're doing here at LifeSpa.com, and we'll see you again.
This recording is brought to you by LifeSpa, where ancient Ayurvedic wisdom meets modern science. Get access to free health video newsletters by Dr. John at LifeSpa.com. These statements have not been evaluated by the FDA. These products are not intended to diagnose, treat, cure, or prevent any disease.